Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. It's lovely to have you here with me. If you're new to the show, big welcome to you. If you're returning, you know the drill here. Now, this next conversation is a really beautiful one because it's with actually one of the teachers who I have come across in my path many times, who's been a big influence on my journey and my mediumship. And the last time I went and spent some time with this beautiful guest was just not long after my dad died, and it was actually my dad had only passed away about 3 weeks before, and he came through to make his presence known in the time that I was there. And I remember this guest we're about to speak to handed me a box of tissues, and even when he was coming through, there wasn't even so much as a tear that came out. But at that time I hadn't even begun to process it. But as time started to pass on, since my dad died, I understood the reason why he came through, and that really hit me and moved me, because I'll tell you what, I've had some really crazy signs from the spirit world recently, including them being around me all the time when doing this podcast. And I have so much time for our next guest, who is called Christine Morgan. She's a medium, she's a teacher, and my God, she's one hell of a human being. So when we came together to do this episode, which was only a few days ago, she's in Australia, about 12 hours ahead. I'm sitting there with my morning coffee. She's there sitting there 30 degrees, and I'm looking at a blustery Britain. But in this episode, and it is a episode that came to me that was inspired as soon as I got off the course with Christine Morgan. It's called Surrender to the Power. Now, what's Surrender to the Power all about? It was because I turned a bit of a corner in that week. First day there, I was being really hard on myself, couldn't even really feel like I was getting a connection to the spirit world, to be honest with you, but I was so in my head. And on day two, I really started to something just hit me, where I started to really understand and comprehend the power of the spirit world, the power that they hold, and how, even though I've thought many times I've surrendered to the spirit world, I still haven't. And it's only when I go on this journey now that I realise what true surrender really looks like. And that was the point of this episode with Christine, is to dig beneath the surface on the power of the power and what surrendering looks like, and that journey that when we do finally let go and let up control, where in every other area of our life we might be a total, even control freak, but we just surrender to that power and what it can really do. So I felt this was a very spirit inspired and infused episode, and it's a really beautiful one. So I welcome you to surrender yourself to Surrender to the Power with Christine Morgan. You're in for a treat. Enjoy. Lots of love. Oh, Christine Morgan, it's so lovely to have you on the Soul Sync. Welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back, Jason.
Oh, do you know what, Christine? And I'll say this from the get-go, you are a regular visitor here, and we absolutely bloody love that on the Soul Sync. So thank you for coming back and gracing us with your presence once again. And I will say from the very get-go that if you haven't come across Christine before, you can go back again in time to the Christine of 2 years ago and listen to her full story there. But I want to start off, Christine, because this is a special episode. And I've recently been on a course with you, and you know, you are a warrior, Christine. I don't even know how you do these trips, flying over to England from Australia. I'm sitting here at the moment at 8 a.m. with a coffee, and you're sitting there sweltering at the other end, expecting sympathy, Christine, for such hot conditions. My goodness. So I was on a course with you recently, and you are such a beautiful soul. It was such a beautiful week. And one thing that came to me when I left that week with you was surrendering to the power. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because my own journey with the power, I'm going to start with that from the beginning, really, I guess. I thought, what does surrendering to the power mean? That'll be a question for you in a moment, Christine. But the power for me, I thought I'd surrendered to it a long time ago. And like we were saying before we hit the record button, on this podcast, I've heard stories of scientists doing experiments with people in China who can teleport money, navigation devices, break metal with nothing more than their own minds. I've heard it all. And do you know what the funny thing was? When I first heard these things, I was cynical at the start. I thought, Simon Duran, I don't believe a word you bloody said. No, I did actually believe it, but I'll take it with a pinch of salt. But one thing that has started to come really onto my radar recently is we have so much potential as a soul. We are an unlimited being of unlimited potential even. But so often we hear this word surrender, and, you know,
I think we need to talk about it because it's so relevant. So I guess to start off with, Christine, tell me about what surrendering to the power firstly means to you, and when you surrendered to the power, and what that looked like, because we don't want to surrender. And I'm going to say one last thing, then I will let you get a word in edgeways, Christine. But even when I go back in my journey, even a year ago, I was trying to control everything in my life, and the more I was trying to control it, my business was undoing at the seams. And the funny thing about it is my business now, I probably just said, we'll just see what happens, go in the flow of life. And it's probably starting to do much better than it ever was when I was stressing myself out. So Christine, first question, surrender to the power. Welcome.
Thank you. What an intro. Okay, right. What does it mean? Well, first of all, you have to recognize that you're a human being first and foremost. You're a spiritual being, but you're very, very human, having a human experience in this life. And so we go through our lives thinking that we're surrendering to things. And, there's this old saying about the universe, let the universe do this, let the universe do that. But quite frankly, let's clear it all up right from the start. The universe won't do anything for you. You've got to do it yourself, because you could pop your clogs tomorrow and the universe will keep on rolling. So basically what surrendering is about looking at your life and who you are and understanding how you operate and interact with things and people, reactions, etc. Because we think we are surrendering, but subconsciously all of us are control freaks, because we want a desired result. So even though we say we are surrendering to something, we'll just let something be, which can happen. Often we're still actually subconsciously engineering or manipulating a situation to get the best result for us. So when we talk about the surrender, that's part of the human psyche all the time. And I would say to you, to surrender naturally, you have to really get to know yourself, because you have to know your fight or flight response. You have to know how you interact in certain situations, emotionally, mentally, and physically, because all of that will affect the natural surrender. And we do hear it bantered around, surrender, surrender, surrender. What does it mean? Well, do you know something, Jason? To surrender is just to be you in every aspect of reality. It's about just being totally authentic in your own self and recognizing the different sides of your nature and personality and how you interact with situations, because your mediumship is not divorced from you. Your mediumship is part of you. It's part of your life. So when we talk about applying the surrender to the spirit world, or supplying the surrender to the nature of sitting in the power, as everybody uses it, really, we can't not be in the power, because we are the power. We are the power. So we can't be out of it. But our mind creates these barriers and doors to think we've got to get into it, or we've got to sit in this structured way, or we've got to do this, or we've got to say this mantra. And so we start to engineer and construct gates in our mind subconsciously that put barriers up to us, when actually the natural surrender of the spirit world is just allowing yourself just to be who you are. Because who you are is good enough. And once you become aware that you have to relinquish the trying as much, you start to be comfortable with just being. I can see you smiling, because I am smiling, Christine. You know I'm smiling. I remember the week's course of me saying this to you. If you just allow yourself just to be, not have to think that you have to get anywhere or do anything, we have to remember the spirit world is such a greater intelligence. They know by frequency, vibration, the change and the shift around us when we're moving our mind to their world. Right. So, sitting there saying, I've got to get in the power, I've got to surrender, I need to surrender, will only create gates and doorways of blocks within your psyche. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And you know, I was sitting here just scribbling away. And the reason I smile when you say trying is because that has been, firstly, my biggest problem is trying. Funny enough, trying has been my biggest problem. And the reason why is because I so know that I have the ability to do this and the ability to be a great medium. And in every other aspect of your life, in preconditioning, from being a child, there's no other area of my life where I don't try. So I'm starting to come to the conclusion as well that I am spending the second half of my life undoing all the lessons from the first half of my life that I've learnt, because we get these limiting beliefs. And, you know, it's interesting as well, because to actually surrender, you have to go on quite a journey with that, especially if you're on a mediumship journey or whatever, because you're it goes against everything that has kind of been programmed into you from a young age. You know, right, you need to step back and not do anything. And I'd sort of sit there going, yeah, right, it's that easy, is it? Oh, bloody hell. If it was that easy. But so you're surrendering to something, and I understand why a lot of people struggle with this. You are surrendering to something, and you might be a skeptic at the moment. You know, you might not believe in the spirit world. So, you know, you're asking, well, we're not asking, you know, do it yourself if as it were. But what we're trying to address today, firstly, is why we don't want to surrender. And that is because, you know, I think part of it also comes down to this kind of scarcity mindset that we live in, that, and you made another interesting point there as well, because sometimes we have to overcome these limiting beliefs that we have. And I'd even go a step further as saying sometimes I would think that I am feeling something, but actually I'm thinking it rather than feeling it. So you have to go through a deep process of inner work to even understand this. But what I want to say to people now is the power is available. And my goodness, it's since I've discovered it, it's like, I was almost laughing to my mum last night, Christine. I said, honestly, mum, it's, you know, I can get the answers from the spirit world so easily these days. You know, I've spent my whole life trying to come up with the answers. I just go, what do I need to do? Oh, thank you. Thank you. So appreciative. So, you know, that is what I wanted to say in that regard. But I guess, when did you sort of come to surrender fully to the power?
Well, if I can, if you know, first of all, like the spirit world hasn't got and doesn't give us all our answers to everything in our life, because we're real. So we have personal responsibility, and we have to be responsible for all our course of actions, words and deeds, thoughts. So for myself, I'll be really honest with you. I've been doing this 36 years now, and I don't think the first 15 years of what I was doing, I was surrendering. I'll be quite frank about it.
Wow.
If I could go back and change the first 15 years, I would. I was taught about the power by my dad, and my dad used to make it look so easy. And I think for those years, I was trying to be part of something or get into something that was greater than me, but I wasn't aware that the process I was hindering because of my own mind. And then over many years, my dad used to say to me, you just need to be quiet. Which for me is very difficult anyway. You must, and I've got a very, very fast mind. In fact, my mind's getting better as I'm getting older. It's a bit late now, but it's slowing down a bit, but I'm very, very quick. So I've always been like that. So I've had to really work hard to learn to be quiet within myself. And so my dad used to say, learn to be quiet, learn to trust the silence within you, rather than looking outside of yourself for the silence, because you are the silence.
Wise words, isn't that? Very wise words.
So for myself, the first 15 years, you know, I was able to work, I demonstrated, did readings, I started to take small groups, I was teaching at a basic level, and then, you know, got into a bit deeper, more advanced teaching. But when I look at it now, yes, I was capable of doing that, but I wonder to myself how deep of my connection would have been quicker if I had surrendered, because we have it in our head that we have to get a result. You have to get a result intuitively. You have to get a result with your healing, with your artwork, your evidential communication, whether you're doing inspirational speaking, trance. You are result driven because you're socially conditioned to be result driven.
That's interesting.
You are. But the thing is, if I can say, if you let go of having a result and you enjoy it, you will be surprised what you get at the other end. So for the first 15 years, I had to really learn hard about the understanding of my own energy, because my own energy was so quick, I could just go whoop, and get a contact, and my dad would say, slow it down. So I had to go backwards and learn. And then maybe I started to recognize that my mediumship was feeling empty. My mediumship, I was feeling...
What did that look like?
It just felt that, I could do it. And so, but I needed a deeper feed for me. I needed to understand more. And then I started to, obviously, experiment and do different things and follow different things. And I'm always reading, researching and learning, because I don't think you should ever stop. But the other aspect was I started to review. I've always been very passionate about my relationship with the spirit world from day one. Always had a passionate relationship with them. And I started to review that relationship. And I started to say to the other world, well, I need to learn to be a bit quieter because I feel like I need more depth in my mediumship. And that depth, let me tell you, is not getting better evidence. It's not, being a greater medium. It doesn't come into that. The depth is the depth of the soul journey and the understanding of me and that world. So I started to, obviously I'd always been sitting, and I just started to think a bit deeper about things. And I used to say to the spirit world, well, I'm just going to be quiet and be in your presence. And let's see. And then I realized over a period of time, I didn't have to try to do anything, because, Jason, the spirit world could not be there. And so they were always there. My work always flowed. I'm like every other medium. You have days where you're not so great and days where you're fantastic. That's the nature of the beast. But if you don't stop and reflect and review, what happens is you can actually just move yourself away from where you actually should be. And we see this happening when people go out to teach too early. They're working with mediumship for a few years or 5 years, and the next thing you know, they're running their own groups, and they have little understanding of the nature of being. Because what the spirit world want us to do is just be. And when we move our mind into that power, you hear people say, oh, build the power. But you can't build the power. You build your experience of the power. So as you build your experience of the power, you then start to unfold a deeper relationship with the other world. And you get to that place of just knowing that you are part of it and they are part of you, rather than it being just a faculty ability that you can do. You merge and you melt into them. And so they are always with you. And that natural everyday guidance, if it's needed, not all the time, because I certainly don't believe you should be talking to dead people every day. Absolutely not. I think that you've got to have a life experience. Absolutely. And I think that once you melt into them and you merge and there's a depth comes about in your development, but you can't express what it means to you until you have the experience of it.
Do you know what? I've only recently got to that stage, and I would say it is... Do you know what I'd say? It's only really in the last 2 weeks, if I'm totally honest with you. It was since your course, because... And this happens every day. Every time I go on one of these courses, the first day... I'm in my head. It's almost like I need a day to sort of settle in. I normally always have a wobble the first day, and then second day I'm sort of off. But something happened to me recently where, and when I mentioned about the spirit world giving me the answers, I do want to confirm that my belief is the same as you said. But what I mean by that is, I felt them around me every time I come to do something on this podcast at the moment. I'm feeling them around me with that. Yeah. And I used to sit here, for instance, going, oh, what shall I do this week? What shall I do? What inspiration? Thinking I'm in some sort of power. I'm not, I'm fully in my head. So, and since I've given them control, well, anyone who's listening to the podcast will know, it's totally changed in the space of a couple of weeks. And do you know the saddest thing about it, Christine? I can't take any of the credit for that, other than the hard work and the hours, because the inspiration came from, I think, the spirit world.
Of course. because you're doing it for their world. They're with you. And I think that part of the problem is that people associate the power being removed from them or the spirit world being removed from them. And, when we think about this, in all the old pioneers in the old days and the greats, what did they do when they had an issue with their mediumship? Well, they didn't look for the next class or the next exercise or who's the best teacher and this is what happens today. They didn't. They used to sit in the power. They'd sit in the presence of just the spirit, and the spirit would recognize things that were happening, and little thoughts, inspirational ideas, little doorways would open to help them and guide them. But you see, what we do today is we have an era of people looking for the next best thing.
Yes, we do.
And they don't stop. They don't stop and recognize just really how blessed we are and what we have to be able to touch that other world and have them touch us in the first place. I mean, really, Jason, that's majestic in itself. And I feel today, this is Christine on a soapbox, I feel a lot of people have lost the majesty of the spirit world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. And do you know what I think it is like you said, when we are in the power but that is always available to us. So for a lot of people, it's like an epiphany, even realizing that this is available to you. But I understand something else about it as well. And this is a really important part, I think, is the results. So even when I used to start sitting in the power, in my own energy, it was always with an expectation that, spirit, well, please, could you help me with this thing? Yeah. I'd really like to today sit there and feel this. And like you said, the spirit world are a greater intelligence. I'm almost insulting them by doing that every time, because I'm not giving them the opportunity. Yeah, I'm not giving them the opportunity to come and impress on me anything, because I've come to a decision on what they must do and serve to me. It's almost, when you think about it, it's almost like a totally wrong relationship. Like, what other relationship do you go, I want this from you? And it's almost like you're not asking for advice.
It is. And what that becomes is you become like a psychic vending machine, put $10 or 10 quid in and get an answer. Well, it doesn't work like that. So it's not like a can of Coke. You're not a vending machine, and what we need to do is we need to keep that, we hear the word sacred bantered around so much. And yes, it's very important. But the truth is, very few people actually get to grips with understanding the sacredness of what we do. And, when we talk about spiritualism, when we talk about developing mediumship, we're talking about developing our own lives. We're talking about the journey of our life. And because we're just here for this little snowflake of a moment, we're like a little breath of a snowflake, and the snowflake melts. And as that snowflake melts and it moves to another dimension, you've had this life experience. And if the life experience is spent trying to be something, then you never reach a place of comfort, a contentment with who you are and your authenticity, because you never feel good enough for yourself.
And there's also disalignment as well with that, because if you're trying to be something that you are not truly, there's going to feel like a disalignment there, isn't there?
Of course. But when you're working with the power and you're surrendering naturally to things and you're working with the power, the spirit will know all those things. And it's when it really comes down to the big old word, of course, of trust and faith. And when you know that the spirit is there, this works, they understand, things will happen for you and doors will open that you will be surprised. When I look back now in my life, certain things, when I look, how did that happen to me? Where did that come from? Or what happened? And I see they were opportunities that were given to me, or little openings of pathways which I needed to explore, and I needed to do things. And it was meant to be. It was very much meant to be. Had I tried to rationalize it and not followed it, I wouldn't have had the experience. And so I think that we try to go into the power when the power is part of us. We remove it from ourselves by our thought, because you are the power incarnate. Absolutely. You can't change that.
It's interesting when you just mentioned about reflecting. I believe recently, and I believe this, I feel that the spirit world for me, and if we use this podcast and my business as an example, I felt like I had an epiphany moment the other day where it became really apparent to me that the spirit world have been influencing me for a very long time and helping things to facilitate, because it started to make me realize, well, why is it that person came across my path in that coincidence and whatever? And it made me realize that the power has been helping me even when I wasn't fully surrendered to it and accepting it. The spirit world, I believe, have been moving things to try and help me in my circumstance. And do you know what? Because another thing, I've got a very busy mind like you, Christy. I'd probably never even stopped to comprehend that for a period of time. And it made me realise that so often, I think one of the first things people will even experience, and when I used to sit, sometimes I would sit there to try and experience the power that we're, like I've said before, we're always connected to it. We're not having to fish out the telephone number and dial it in to get a connection. It's, always there. But it made me realise as well, when it comes to the power, sometimes you don't even feel it, but it's always there. And the spirit world are always doing things. And we're so quick to... And one of the hardest things to me has been trying to settle my mind enough in order to even become flat. And I think we live in this world now as well, where people have got such big expectations. Like, people are almost sort of expecting to sort of sit there and within the first 5 times of doing it, suddenly feel that their guide is manifesting in front of them. And it just doesn't work like that. It's very subtle. And this is what people don't understand at first. It is subtle. And it's...
Oh, hello, dear listener. It's me, Jason Paul, and I want to welcome you to my Christmas grotto. Honestly, half the elves are on strike, the wrapping paper has run out, half the fairy lights have blown, the cat's eaten the tinsel, and even the QR codes for the naughty list have stopped working. Honestly, festive joy everywhere you look. I've had enough of it, I tell you. Meanwhile, I'm here trying to record episodes, edit intros, and not accidentally superglue my fingers to a gift tag. Santa does one night of work, and I've been in this for weeks. Now, I've just taken what we call a fag break, just for 5 minutes. I've told the elves that I need to step away. I'm struggling to even keep a serious face in this, but I've got essentially a Christmas competition for you. Now, I'm giving away my top 5 spiritual books. Most of them, so quite a few of them are about mediumship, but I don't want to spoil the Christmas surprise. Where is the fun in that? So I'm going to give away not the originals, because I love them and you wouldn't want them anyway, because the corners are all bent and they look horrible and there's highlights all over them. So I will be sending you brand new copies, but books that have genuinely shaped my spiritual journey and I refer to all the time. So to enter, it's really simple. All you need to do is leave a podcast review on Apple or Spotify. So just leave a review on Apple or Spotify. One review, very simply, is one entry into Santa's magical draw. The winner will be announced on the Christmas Day episode, which I'll probably be recording whilst solely on mince pies and driving the ship here at the Christmas HQ on Blind Faith. So I will announce the winner, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps other people to find the show and it will get you off my naughty list if I could get the QR code working.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry, no. Well, I was just going to say it's the subtleness where the richness is.
And what do you mean by the richness?
Well, where you have that true blending of the other world, where you're truly at one with them, where you have that feeling of being at peace with that, knowing deep within you that you are supported and held by something greater than you. And you can't draw it. You can't really explain it in a way that you can give it to somebody on a plate, because it's not possible. It's a feeling within you, because when you're sitting within yourself. You're sitting with your energy, your power, your heart, your soul, your spirit. And so you've got to remember that, it's all about the mind as well. So it's about how we understand our own minds in those moments of sitting with the other world as to how we get our results. And I think that if we could just all relinquish the need, and I think we've become needy mediums, if we relinquish the need to construct and engineer a result, we would find that our mediumship would be deeper, our blending would be deeper, and we'd be able to sit quite comfortably. Because the thing is, it's a discipline, Jason. So when you've got a busy mind, you've got to learn to discipline it and practice it. It doesn't happen overnight, as you know, but it's worthy at the end of it. And it will show you different things of yourself, because what you're doing is you're meeting yourself in the power. You're getting to know the true, authentic you, not the Jason or the Christine that we can see on screen, but the real inner person, the real inner spirit. That's what you're doing in the power. And that's what the spirit world want. Because then when you come to that understanding of knowing you then fully can work better with their world and for their world, because you can't escape yourself, right? Do you know right from wrong?
You do.
Listen.
I agree. And I also think that there's a lot to this. What made the Christine of 15 years of thinking she was in her power finally make you realise, okay, I'm not? Because, Christine, I find that surprising of you. You strike me as an extremely, well, I say you strike me. I know you're an extremely sharp tool in the toolbox, always looking for knowledge. So what was it that made you suddenly have that kind of epiphany moment yourself?
I was in the power, Jason. I just didn't come to a clear understanding of myself in it. I knew I could feel the presence. I knew when I was in the presence, and I knew when I wasn't. But I didn't really give enough. I don't feel, and people could disagree, but I didn't give enough thought to what was available to me in that. Because I wanted to be successful. I wanted it to work. I wanted to be a good medium and do the right thing by the spirit world. Every medium does. And no medium can say they don't, because we do want to do a good job. That's human. But the other side of it is that, with my spirit friends, I just had this really strong sense of, I need a little bit more depth. I need something more. Perhaps I think if I look back now, I was getting to know myself a bit more then. I could do the work, no problem. I could feel the presence. I could feel the spirit. I knew when I was in and when I wasn't. And I know very much because I'm a very strong psychic as well. And when I was in my early days, a lot of times I look back now and I think, oh, that might have been a bit psychic, not so much from the spirit, where you thought you were in the presence and you weren't. And then you get to a stage where that inner knowing is such an ingrained part of you. There's no disruption. There's no wavering from it. And so I think as you grow with your mediumship, you should always, no matter how many years you've been doing it, review it, reflect, contemplate, try to understand it. Now, I don't sit and think about it. I just say, I'm with the spirit world. Boom. And I'm with the spirit world because it's part of me. It's become me. Does that make sense? And I've become it.
It does.
Put it that way.
Well, I guess it makes total sense to me. And I guess because a lot of what you do now is teaching, and you are such a good teacher, like it's just unbelievable. But how do you know, for instance, and I'm asking this question because this is something it's one of the biggest questions I think we all have. Is it me or is it spirit, i.e. the power? How do you know if a student's in the power or not in the power?
How do I know?
Right. I know how I can tell, but how can you discern between psychic and spirit?
Oh, I can feel the difference. I can feel the presence of the other world. And so there's several things that are in favor there. That one, you're looking for the power. You can feel it. You can feel the presence of the other world. Secondly, you should always be able to link with them and feel the mind in the spirit as well as feel the mind of the student. So you're feeling where the student is at, and then you can see where sometimes they waver if they drop into the psychic and pop back up again into the spirit world, and you can feel the presence of the other world. And then, as you know, the basics is that we have people who give great information and they're totally working psychically, yet can think it's a link from the spirit and evidential because someone's accepting it from someone who's passed on. And yet there's no presence, there's no power with them anymore. So it's definitely a feeling, Jason. And let me tell you, for Christine, it's a knowing. It's a knowing. I just know. It's like when I'm demonstrating, I don't stop and cognitize. I don't have to think. I just know it. So I become it. I just be it. Does that make sense?
It does. And even you have to go on a journey as well, because when I get a piece of evidence, and I would say I've literally just recently turned this corner, but as we know with mediumship, you can take 2 steps forward and 4 back, as that's what and the spirit world did a lot of very clever things on that week with you, actually. Now I've reflected on it. So I have this problem that whenever I get a piece of evidence, the first thing I do is it goes up into my head, and then I'm trying to place it. And Christine, half the time I don't even realise I'm bloody doing it. It just seems to happen. But I've realised now that every time I'm doing that, it is taking me out of the power. So one of my lovely friends who, Donna, she's got very strict with me now, Christine. If she even hears me say think, I'm in trouble. I was almost on the naughty step yesterday. She said, you don't think it, you feel it. And I know it's right. Oh, sorry, Donna, I'm so sorry about that. But I guess the reason why I want to talk about that and the evidence kind of going up to my head as well is because it's how we live our lives in everyday life. And what the beauty of the mediumship is, it really is so simple, but it's the simplicity of it that makes it so difficult. And to talk about some of the lessons I felt the spirit world showed me in that week with you, because I do think these are good lessons to people. So I'd sort of started to get a bit confident 3 days in, thinking, oh yes, I can do it now, throwing myself up, wanting to do the platform, which, as everyone knows, as everyone knows, I just love the platform. I don't know what it is, but I seem to just revel in that environment. I think because I'm just a natural born comedian, perhaps. I don't know what it is, but I seem to love it up there. But the spirit world played an interesting game on me, because you gave us some very specific activities, which you may not even be able to remember now after travelling back to the other side of the world, where I had to get someone from the spirit world, a communicator, to come in, and then you got me to then bring in someone from the same family. And so and this was a test for me. The spirit world are testing me, I believe, in my ability to feel the power. So I did the first reading, went fantastically well. And in the second person, I knew something just didn't feel right, because the person I was reading for said, no. And they did that because it was someone else. And it happened quite a few times during the week where you would be very explicit in your instruction. I would think, well, of course that's what's going to happen, because that's what Christine said. And then I was sort of smiling to myself on the way home, thinking, why is it they kept doing that to me all week? And I thought, I know what it is they're evolving my mediumship. So because I've had this thing where we all have it, where we fear the no. And I need to start to get to the point which I think I'm almost at now, where it's like, I don't mind a no, because I know what I know.
Right. I do remember. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to be comfortable with your no's, but you have to also understand what they're about. You must be comfortable with saying it. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, accepting it. And then saying, okay, let me work with it. If you feel it's strong enough, you can work with it. But that doesn't mean like being dig. Because as you're trying to dig it out and see what it means or get something else, you're moving your awareness. And like I explained to you on the week, is when you have a communicator, as soon as you bring in your own awareness and ad lib of little comments or start putting a thought in there, you move your awareness from the being of the awareness of the communicator. So you might just have someone and then you go, oh, yeah, oh, you've moved your awareness away. You need to stay there. You need that discipline to stay there and become them. So you are being them. And so that's hard to master as well. And then, of course, in that exercise, you had a contact and then the mind went and moved to someone else. So that's practice, discipline, and exercises to be able to bring in another communicator from the other family, because every exercise we do is always an experiment. And so what happens is it's not because they want to test you, because the spirit world actually don't test you, Jace, but what they do is they're always there. We have these experiences, again, that help us come back to self-recognition of how our mind works.
So, I felt they were doing that deliberately as a listen.
No.
Okay.
The spirit world don't give you lessons like that. Don't do that deliberately. What it is just your mind moved to another communicator. So your mind moved away from the family you were working with, the first communicator, and picked up a second. They don't say, "Oh, let's trick Jason."
Why did my mind do that, Christine? Why?
Because it's busy. Because your mind, we get caught in the groove, right? You get caught into a big loop and into a groove. And I say, people get stuck on the butcher's hook. Don't get stuck on the butcher's hook, because what happens with that is your mind gets in a groove of working and becoming habitual with the communications. And then what that does is it creates a neurological pathway within the brain. So the brain goes doot doot, rather than being in the awareness of the spirit person. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it makes sense to me, again, because I've learned so much in the last couple of weeks. I feel that for me, I've got a very quick mind, and like I spoke about recently on this podcast, ADHD brain. I never stop thinking. It's like, I do believe that has advantages to my mediumship, actually, because I'm extremely imaginative.
Yes.
But I'm trying to get out of the habit of a lifetime. And because in every other aspect of our job, we are designed as human beings to go and live our life in a way where we're constantly making assessments, threats, opinions, judgments. So it's a very hard habit to get out of for me. But I understand now that. And then another thing I get when I start doing a reading or I'm on a platform, I feel there's a pressure instantly to get someone. And I need to think, Jason, okay, you might not say anything for a minute, but what is that building? That's building presence. It's building interest. Don't get me wrong, probably after about 5 minutes, you'll get people walking out. Is he all right? He hasn't said anything up there. But I do think that sometimes, I'm putting myself under pressure. I'm already in my head from the moment I'm sort of called to kind of go up there. I did want to talk about, because this is relevant, and I think to get to the point of surrendering takes a lot of work. And I think I don't think this is what I need to stop saying. Donna will be slapping me right now. The book Magician to Mystic and the week that you was recently on, and that journey between being able to get a connection and get a bit of evidence and perform, i.e., a magic trick, to going on that journey of becoming the mystic. And I have to say that when I read that book, it made a lot of sense, because the journey to becoming a medium, and this is why I love going on these courses, and I say to my mum, I get as much from my mediumship, if not more, for my own life. And even if I go back to June this year, because I've actually done 4 weeks this year. I've never done that before, not even come close to that. But I was in a place where I was trying to control everything. Things were unraveling. And it pushed me into the present moment like never before, because I'd literally come onto a week in July. It was like World War III going on back in my business. Things were I was trying to control situations that weren't able to be controlled. And I knew that when I had to go back on the Monday, it was going to be a really hard week. So it actually pushed me into the present moment, because anything other than the present moment felt overwhelming. So I guess where I'm going with this is the journey to get to that place of full surrender requires a lot of work, and it also requires a lot of healing. The journey to becoming a medium, and it always is about the healing. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We have these self-limiting beliefs, and I think they hold us back so much in life, Christine.
Yeah. Of course they do.
And they've been preconditioned as well. And I think also the fact to get to the point of unlocking the power, you have to tackle the beliefs you have about yourself. Because this is the crazy thing about being a human, I'll just say, is I feel that if we fully really backed ourselves and encouraged ourselves, the possibilities are endless on what you can do.
Absolutely, totally. And I totally agree with you. And I think, like I said at the very beginning of this talk, it's about the self. It is about the self. Understanding the surrender is about surrendering to yourself, but also really looking at the authentic self, the dark side and the light side of yourself. You know yourself better than anybody. You know how you respond, react, interact. And of course, when you're on that journey of understanding, and everybody uses the word journey, but let's say when you're in life, having these real experiences, when you are working in this field or endeavoring to develop in it, it makes you look at your life through different eyes. And that's getting to a place of peace with the authentic self of you. And that means all your scars, all your issues, whoever you are, whatever, all of us. But it's also looking for the happy points, things that uplift you, things that inspire you, things that give you that oomph in life, that impetus to do something and that drive. And so you talked earlier about imagination. Those sort of things can work in your favor. Absolutely they can. You just have to discipline them so you know what's real and what's not real. And part of the problem, I think, is that people are in too much of a rush to develop. And I feel that, when we look back at the old, and I know I'm talking about the old people.
Oh, but I love it, Christine.
The pioneers. The pioneers and the greats, they sat by the fire. I used to sit by the fire with my dad on a Friday night. He used to have a couple of his friends come round in a little old house in England, in Cheshire, and they'd sit and they'd turn the lights off and there'd just be the fire and there'd be 5 or 6 of us. And I was only in my 20s. I think, oh, look at these men and women, what are they doing? But let me tell you, I had the most profound experiences and things then people said to me then. I thought, oh yeah, God, what I would do to have a night like that back again, because there was such value and worth. But none of them were racing off to get to a development group to get on the platform or to become a reader or anything else. And there used to be a beautiful lady that sat with my dad for 15 years. 15 years, and she never made a link or a contact. She was a lovely soul. And then one night they were sitting in circle round this fire. We used to sit on a Friday night, and the spirit just totally moved her, and she stood up and gave this magnificent, inspired address to the circle. Mm-hmm. After 15 years, she just used to say, I just like coming to sit. I just like to be with the spirit and be with people. Didn't want to do anything. And then the spirit one day just put her in. She was in a very light altered state, and the most magnificent address came out from her. So you see, even there's somebody who's not doing anything, the spirit is there. So what we're doing, we hinder ourselves by trying to get something, be someone, do this. And you see this on Facebook, you see it on TikTok, you see it everywhere. Do this as a medium, do that as a medium, or come and book in my course and I'll teach you this, do. When really everybody needs to strip everything back and come back to the basics and have a look at who they are as people and recognize that passion and that connection with the other world is there. It's up to us to nurture it. It's up to us to grow with it. And it's up to us to be open and flexible in our mediumship about what things can happen for us instead of trying to engineer it.
As you were saying that, it was kind of making me feel about actually reclaiming your power, because I think I know that I'm guilty of this, and I was for a long time, and my granddad came through with a message to actually address this point with me. But I would read a book or whatever it might be, a course or whatever, and I would kind of feel that I have to finish that book or whatever. Oh, I have to go on that course and I have to chase this. But by the very essence of feeling that I have to do that or whatever, I'm actually relinquishing my power because I'm putting my power in someone else's hands. And what the spirit world came through to say to me recently was, Jason, you need to stop this. Your way of explaining things and whatever, and your opinion is your way. That book is someone else's worldview and opinion. You need to come up with your own theories, concepts and ideas. And actually, that was why I never really talked for a long time on this podcast about mediumship, because about offering people advice and stuff like that, because I would feel like I wasn't able to do that. But the very essence of doing that, again, I'm robbing myself of my power. And that, really shone out as well. I want to say so because this is, you mentioned another point, and I think this is so important, and this is why the Soul Sinkers is. I think that too many teachers or whatever, they put themselves on this kind of pedestal where, and I see it all the time in other spiritual podcasts and whatever, where I actually felt for a long time that I couldn't be a medium because I felt that, Jason, you're not whiter than white. You don't sit there and do sitting in the power every day. You go out and have 3-4 glasses of wine. Well, I don't do that anymore, Christine. I don't even really want wine anymore. But you go out and you do this. And I'd think, oh, no, I'm not holy or good enough to be able to do these things. But actually, this is why, and a lot of, when I listen to other, this isn't a plug for me in podcasts, I promise, but when I listen to other mediums talk or whatever, so many people aren't talking about the dark sides of it, about addressing those aspects of themselves. And the journey, again, of mediumship is about healing. And you've got to look at those darker aspects of yourself. And I've started to, that's why I talk about it now, because I actually think it's quite funny when I talk about it. But, but it's relevant. You've got to look at those aspects, because if you don't, you're not clearing yourself, energetically, would you say?
I would say yes. And I think that it's important for you to be authentic. And I think you're only answerable to you. The old story about looking at the man in the mirror. You're only answerable to yourself. But it is a healing aspect, mediumship in our lives. It's an influence. And I also feel like when you're doing this in development, you can't escape. You know what's right or wrong. You know when you've spoke out of term or you've said the wrong thing or done the wrong thing. You can't escape those actions, because with the knowledge that you have and the knowing of the other world, you're asking for them to be authentic and transparent to you, to bring you their best. So you owe it to them to do that to yourself. Does that make sense?
It does. And it even took me, this is the crazy thing about it, and people will, I'm sure so many people can relate to it. I've got to the point now where, Christine, I just don't give a crap. I'll talk about anything in my life, because actually I think it's all been leading to this place and this point anyway. And actually I had that moment the other day where I looked back at my journey and I thought, all those things that have happened, I can easily and clearly see how they fit into things. And there's a lot, I do think that there is a lot more to be said for what this, and I have to say, the spirit world are doing behind the scenes than we could ever even imagine. But it does make sense. I want to ask you, because I'm Kristen, I could sit here talking to you for hours, to be quite fair. But how can a medium or someone who is, trying to identify this unlimited source of power that, again, you are connected to. How many times I'm going to use this dialing in the telephone number analogy, but I love it because it makes the point. It's funny. How can a medium tell? How can a medium tell when the power is building versus when they're unintentionally depleting it?
Well, that's really up to the individual, Jason, because you see, when people sense the presence and sense the power, we could all be in a room and sense the presence of the spirit. You and I both been in the room where there's been trance and where there's been people demonstrating and working, and we've sat in the power. and you can feel the presence. So everybody can feel that. As opposed to when you're depleting it, you can't deplete the power. You deplete yourself or your thoughts of it. You can't really deplete the power. The feeling of the power building, like I've said to you, is it's not like it builds and builds and builds and builds. You're building your experience of being in the presence, being in the power, presence, whatever you want to call, at one with yourself, where the spirit world is. Now, what happens is on the depletion side of that, I think that what you have to categorize here is when you're depleted and you pull on your psychic reserves, which are not healthy for you, or you haven't sat well, or you haven't been sitting in the silence just to refuel yourself, because sitting in the presence is the golden glue. It's the golden glue that holds you and the spirit world close. So you need to give them that time to be quiet so you can move your mind to that higher level of consciousness and be aware of things. Now, when that's not happening, because either you're depleted with life or things going on, everything gets hit and miss. You know, your mediumship becomes ropey. And so you can't really deplete that power because it's consistent there all the time. What the depletion is either your approach, your attitude, or your thoughts about it. But you do have to start off with the discipline to practice sitting in that silence first. Only through the discipline of doing that will you come to know within yourself the feeling of it. And remember, Sorry, go. A lot of people feel the energy of themselves and think, oh, that's the spirit. And it's not. It's just their own energetic field. That's why it takes discipline, it takes time, and it takes practice.
Something jumped into my mind when you were talking then about the feeling of the power and so on. I agree. I feel that with the power, I had to do that time of sitting to understood what the power feels like. Now, my story is complicated because in 2019, I had a psychotic episode driven by loads of different things. My time in the police, I was very ill at the time. And this is an interesting story. So leave psychosis episode there. Then I'm trying to develop my mediumship years later. And when I had psychosis, there were a number of, me and my mum had to go through therapy for a long time to sort of talk about it. And the road to recovery was about a 5-year one. And they would go through warning signs. And we had so much sit down kind of like meetings about what the warning signs were of the psychotic episode and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't realise that I had been shutting down my mediumship for years because certain feelings that I felt within my head that only I can, it's very hard for me to articulate it, but it's like a sort of buzzing of the temple was a symptom I felt in psychosis. So for years, I would get that feeling and think, oh, right, that's not good. I'm getting that feeling again. And that feeling now, I have come to realise that is my in the power feeling. So it's just a really interesting thing because even when I was getting it, when I was sitting, it was then confusing me because it was a feeling that I associated with psychosis, which then begs a wider question of, where did the psychosis start and end if some of the feelings and sensations I were getting, I now attribute it. And even I said this to my mum the other day, and she said, oh, you're not getting it, are you? I said, no, this is now my spirit feeling. But that also makes me ask a question, that when it was happening, the episode, was it the spirit world around me that was making me feel that feeling for them trying to protect me because I was very sick? But the reason I give that example is because for ages I've been shutting down the power without TV. Well, shutting it down, then I know what you're going to say. It's not shut down because it's always there. But I have been going, oh, no, I need to get rid of that feeling. That's one of my warning signs.
And that's because your mind has created that and has that association with that episode of when you were ill. So we follow this pattern of mind association, but actually it sometimes can be very far from the truth. It isn't always the reality. It isn't always the reality. The power can have very different feelings. Sometimes it can be heavy, muddy, light. Sometimes it's very dense. It's just that beautiful place of silence, but there is different feelings around it. But I would say to you, that is mind association associated with when you were sick. It could have been, it could not have been. But the thing is, it's hard for me to give an opinion on that because I wasn't there, Jason. But the other side of that is that we have to remember that our mind creates patterns. And we have to remember that our mind has safety guards within it to help us safeguard our journey through life. That's what it's geared up for. That's what the brain's there for. Mm-hmm. It's to guide you and protect you. So sometimes we get these signs. You hear people say, oh, I know it's a lady because it always comes to the left side. I know it's a man because it always touches my right cheek. I mean, really and truly, is that something that happens in the spirit world? Or has their mind associated a structure?
Well, it's a pattern, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. It isn't always the reality. So that feeling there, you might get that feeling particularly in the presence, of course you can. When I'm working in the spirit world, my right ear goes bright red as my shirt.
Oh, is that why you have your hair down in that direction to sort of mask when you're in it and not?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. It's just my hair. But my right ear goes absolutely red and I can feel it pulsate when I'm really in the power sometimes.
Oh, I'll be keeping an eye out for that next time. I'll be getting my little binoculars out next time I watch you demonstrate.
So you see, that can take place, but the mind associates with patterns, and what our job is to look at our patterns, what is healthy for us and what's not healthy for us.
Well,
it's a deep understanding, Jason, about us as people.
It is, and you really need to get to know yourself. And I actually think that all we are is a pattern. We have so much of the same thought processes every single day because it actually takes effort to form new neural pathways. It takes effort to do that.
Yeah, they say it takes 2 years to create a new pattern of behavior within the neurological pathways in the brain, that every time you stop a habit, it takes up to 2 years to create a new habit to replace that. But, we have neuroplasticity, we have all these things about the brain, the mind that we know more of today. And the funny thing is we've got all this in books, but really sometimes I think it can be so simplistic if we're just authentic and get to know ourselves. So when we talk about the natural surrender, my words would be that natural surrender is for you just to surrender to yourself and be you in your full authenticity and know in your heart with your faith and your discipline that the other world is there. But the natural surrender is something where we don't make it into something like a stage play or dress it up. We have that beautiful essence of the other world in a natural way, because that's what it is.
Do you know what? Even with this podcast, when I was on a course in July, I came home and I'll show you this. So I was on, oh no, it was the week I was on with you. So I came home and no words of a lie, this was on my doorstep. And you can tell after getting back from the college, having that on my doorstep straight away just reminded me of the college. I thought, what's this interesting looking
it's just
postcard? Yeah. And then I heard the spirit world shout at me about the podcast, because by that point I still hadn't started the podcast back up again. I was, sort of sitting there in my spiritual closet, imposter syndrome. And then I felt them shout to me, just get on with it, just be you. And do you know what? Since I've started really embracing just being,
yes,
me, the power is flowing like never before.
Because you're just you, and there's nothing wrong with any of us. We all have these frailties of being human, but we're all actually really good, kind people. We just have frailties. And yes, we have people we dislike and we have people who don't like us, blah, blah. That's human nature. But in the essence of everything spiritually, we're all the same. And we try to dress everything up and we try to make things more difficult. It does take practice, it does take discipline and understanding, but it takes absolute brutal honesty with yourself to recognize things about I am with it, I am not with it, and to believe that you are part of that other world all the time. You're never divorced from it, you're never away from it. It's always part of you.
Well, this is exactly why some people don't want to go down the mediumship journey, because it involves too much looking at yourself. Like the amount of things it threw up with me that I had to address in my own life when I was developing my mediumship, and I still continue to have to do so. But that's what helps me so much. Christine, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you a last question. If you could give one message to developing mediums or people trying to feel the power, what would this message, and want to develop even the relationship with the power, what message would you like to leave those people on today?
I would say don't give up. I would say find yourself a good teacher or someone who gives good guidance and understands it. And find people who put their money where their mouth is. So you see their work, you look at the quality of their work, their education around the understanding of the power and the presence of the spirit world. That's vital. The background education, not just someone who's a great medium up on a platform, but look at the depth of their knowledge and understanding, and also someone who is supportive and who can guide you in the pitfalls. That's really important. Mediums need mediums. We need to nurture each other, nourish each other, and be there for supporting each other, because we all go through the same pitfalls. But what I would say is understand spiritual disciplines. Don't give up. And have faith, because the spirit cannot not be there.
Do you know what? On a closing note as well, and I just felt called to say this point. Very wise Cowden Davis said something to me a few months ago, and I used to do sitting in the power because, yes, it is a discipline. I agree with that. But I would sort of go, right, it's sitting in the power time now. Let's go up there and do it. Totally, sort of going up there to not in the right frame of mind. And he said to me, he goes, well, you're sort of going but you don't really want to be going to do it. You're sort of dragging your heels to go sit in the power. He said, well, that's hardly making the spirit world want to work with you. And I thought, well, yeah, that's a good point, actually. And it's so funny because you do these things and I do these things. And then I think to myself, that's just common sense. It's like going and meeting a person. If I go meet Michelle and be like, oh, God, Michelle, I was not really. So, and that's why I felt called to call that, to tell that even.
Yeah, no, it's very important, very important. But, the spirit world have a far bigger vision of us than we do. And they recognize, and they will meet you more than halfway when you make an effort. Trust me. They will. Which
is very generous of them, actually, given the fact that I think they come and met me at 95% at times. So, Christy, thank you. It's so nice to have you on. And I know that loads of people will have really enjoyed having you back on. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me. Always interesting to talk.
Well, that was my beautiful conversation with the lovely Christine Morgan. I feel so privileged to have even had so much time in Christine's company, given she lives in Australia. But when our paths have crossed on courses like the one I had recently with her, it really moved me a lot. I know my passion, what I want to be doing is platform. And platform, what we mean by that is just doing it in front of a larger group of people. I just love that energy. And Christine really brought out so much of my confidence in that week just gone by. Trust me, I wasn't confident when I first was standing in front of people, but actually I did. Do you know what, on that week there was actually some really interesting things, because on the first day I had this lady next to me who was saying, come on Jason, come on, go up, and I sort of thought that she was really experienced. I sort of thought she was almost sort of saying to me, come on Jason, why are you not getting up there? So I went up there and oh my God, I was so in my head with my dad's thing and whatever, and I don't know what happened, but I could feel the spirit world, it's a typical example of how powerful they are. They helped me out in that moment, because trust me, my head was all over the bloody place. But as always, if you want to get in touch with the show, email address in the footer, description even, and I'm going to be releasing some Power of Free videos on YouTube. And if you want to know what the Power of Free is all about, it's been coming up in my mediumship listens recently, and I know I owe you lots of episodes about my mediumship, and I'm going to be recording some over the next few days for you, just to tell you where I'm up to. I'm also going to be doing a special meditation episode where I'm going to walk you into your power. Ooh, very exciting. So if you subscribe, then obviously you'll get notified when that comes out. But until next time, I love you lots. Thanks for listening. I'm Jason Paul. Bye.